Good morning. Welcome to Show Me the Money, Part 2, Trails and Sidewalks. This is Victoria Beal with the Ohio LTAP Center. I have a few quick housekeeping items before I turn it over to your host and moderator for the day, who will be Jeff Shaner. First off, we hope you have lots of questions, and we do have a question box where you can pose your questions while the presenters are speaking. We'll be fielding a few questions after each of their presentations, and then we will be circling back around to address additional questions at the end of the entire session. So please put your questions in early and often in the question box. Also, we have a handout of all presentations that has been loaded into the handouts box. If you're not able to download it from there for some reason, we will send a link out to that handout later, along with hopefully a link to a recording of this session, as long as the technology cooperates. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Jeff Shaner. You ready, Jeff?
Sure, thank you, Victoria. Like Victoria said, this is the second Show Me the Money webinar. This one is going to focus on trails and sidewalks and funding programs that you can use to apply for funding. Speaking today are going to be Dewan Hammonds from the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, Jordan Whisler, Caitlin Harley, and myself, Jeff Shaner from ODOT. Dewan Hammonds from ODNR will be first, and he's going to speak about recreational trails.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me here. Again, I'm Dewan Hammonds with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, and I administer the Clean Ohio Trails Fund and the Recreational Trails Program. My counterpart, Tim Robinson, handles the NatureWorks, local project programs, and the Land and Water Conservation Fund. He cannot be in attendance today, so I'll try to take over his portion of the presentation. I'll let you know ahead of time, I'm not an expert in that area, so if you do have questions, any questions about the NatureWorks program and the Land and Water Conservation Fund, please feel free to call or email Tim Robinson or even myself, and we can try to find the appropriate response to your question. So with that being said, we'll move on to the next slide here. And as I mentioned before, we're going to speak about the Clean Ohio Trails Fund, which is the state-funded recreational trails grant program, and the Recreational Trails Program, which is the federal side, which funding comes from the Federal Highway Administration through the Ohio Department of Transportation Alternatives Program. And again, we have the NatureWorks Local Parks Project Program and the Land and Water Conservation Fund. We'll start off on the next slide speaking about the Clean Ohio Trails Fund. And typically, competitive projects are projects that are consistent with the statewide trails plan, which we really don't have an up-to-date version yet. If your trail project is on your regional trails plan, it may be competitive. Types of projects that we like to fund through the Clean Ohio Trails Fund are like longer distance trail construction projects, or acquisition of abandoned railroad corridors. So if your project has some of those aspects about it, it may be competitive for this grant program. If it has links to population centers or urban areas, it also could be competitive under the program. The Clean Ohio Trails Fund is a reimbursement program, and we can reimburse up to 75% of eligible project costs. So eligible project costs can be design and engineering cost. It can be trail construction cost. We do not do trail maintenance or trailheads under this grant program. So it's strictly trail construction and design and engineering costs. So as we move to the next slide, I'll give you some statistics. Through 2022, we've awarded over $100 million to 317 projects, and you can see the stats there. We've been able to construct new trails, new bridges, some tunnels. Trailheads can be a component of the project, but it has to be a very, very small portion. So say like if you have a $500,000 project and you want to put a gravel trailhead parking lot in that may cost like $10,000 or $20,000, we may consider that, but big trailhead restroom facilities and big huge paved parking lots with lighting are not eligible under the program. We'll also, as on the next slide, we'll talk about what actually is eligible. Again, we mentioned land acquisition projects. When you think about land acquisition, we don't buy big parcels of land. If you're buying a big parcel of land that a trail will go through, we would only like to cost share on the actual trail corridor. So if the trail is going to be 10 feet wide and you have 2 feet on either side, so that's 14 feet. So we would kind of figure out how much acreage out of that big parcel that you would need for the trail, and that's what we would like to cost share on. We can cost share on trail development. Again, we mentioned trailhead facilities only if a small portion of the project, in design and engineering. Design and engineering cannot be a standalone project, so we would have to have some of our funding going into construction, but we can fund for design costs. And we can also do a 2-year look back on those costs from the time we get you into contract, to cover costs that you may have needed to pay for up front in order to have your project move forward in a relatively timely fashion. In the next slide here, the maximum grant award we have in the program is $500,000. Again, it's a 75% reimbursement program. Projects should be completed within 15 months, and projects have to be open to the public for a minimum of 15 years. On the match side, the 25% match side, that can also come from cash, donated labor, like in-kind labor or materials, and also excess land value or some land value. It can't be for land that's already purchased. It would have to be land that the Clean Ohio Trails Fund helped you purchase through the grant. And say if the property owner is selling you the property under its appraised value, that excess dollar amount can be used as the match there. The next few slides, we just want to show you some examples of trail projects that we funded through the Clean Ohio Trails Fund. This is the Big Walnut Creek Trail in Gahanna. The next slide is a bridge we helped participate in constructing. We weren't a major funding piece on this project, but we were able to come in as a matching source, so that was fun. The next few slides can just show you what an abandoned railroad corridor looks like, that an organization had purchased, and we helped come in and construct it. And you can see the progress as you move through the next few slides. You can see the corridor cleared there, and then the next slide you can see the actual finished trail projects. So these are the type of projects we like to fund through the Clean Ohio Trails Fund. The next slide, we'll speak about the Recreational Trails Program. Again, this is through the transportation bill in Congress. So it's always fun when the transportation bill is going to expire. We kind of have to wait for our funding to come up. The next slide here is, can show you the eligible projects that we can fund out of the Recreational Trails Program. Again, similar to the Clean Ohio Trails Fund, we can fund trail development and land acquisition, but we also can fund trail maintenance, restoration. We can fund equipment through this program, but we really have not over the years. Funding equipment, it can be complicated and it's hard to track, and we just have not, as a department in our advisory board, we haven't really funded any equipment grants. So if you have an equipment grant that in mind, you probably want to give us a call first and vet it through us before you take the time and effort to apply for a grant. I would just tell you and be forthright with you, it's going to be hard to get an equipment grant through this program. So as we move forward, we can say we can fund trailhead facilities, and then it can be standalone projects. There is also a component for education and safety. It would have to be safety on the trail or environmental protection on the trail. And we can also fund design and engineering. But again, it would have to be, couldn't be a standalone design and engineering project. It would have to be as part of a construction project. Eligible project sponsors are political subdivisions and state and federal agencies and not-for-profits. This grant program also, on the next slide here, is an 80-20 grant, so we can reimburse you 80% of your eligible project costs, and project awards are capped at $150,000. Again, you have a 15-month timeline to complete the project, and again, the project has to be open to the public for a minimum of 15 years. If you are have interest in constructing or maintaining motorized trails, 30% of our funding every year for this grant program comes from would have to go to motorized projects. So we don't have enough applications every year to use up all this funding. So if you do have a potential motorized trail project, please let us know, because we'd be interested in trying to fund those type of projects there. In a typical year, on our next slide, you can see we accept applications on February 1st for these two programs each year. This may get pushed back in 2022 because we're going to be probably late on announcing our 2021 awards. So this may get pushed back to probably March or April. And we try to make our announcements towards the end of every year. So again, that's not hard and fast. So you probably have to check back with us to see when those actual timelines would be for 2022. The next program on the next slide is the NatureWorks program. And this is the statewide local parks program. I apologize about that. On the next slide, you can see eligible projects or the park and recreation areas. We can fund acquisition of parkland. So this is unlike the trails program where we don't like to buy bigger parcels of land. You can do that through the NatureWorks program. You can do park development of all kinds, such as trails, playgrounds, spray parks, ball fields, restrooms, boating access. We can do rehabilitation and also some parts of design and engineering as part of the project. The local eligible project sponsors are local subdivisions of government. You must own the property. The applicant must own the property, and school districts and nonprofits are not eligible under NatureWorks. On the next slide, you can see the match is similar to the Clean Ohio Trails Fund, where it's a 25% match with one caveat: the 20% of the local match must come from the local sponsor in the form of like hard cash. It can't be from another funding source or grant. Donated labor is allowed as match for the program, and the NatureWorks can match the Federal Land and Water Conservation Fund on the same project. So you can probably, if you have one big project, you can apply for the Land and Water funds and NatureWorks funds, and they can kind of help offset each other as far as match. Again, the grant project property must remain in the public recreational use for 15 years after the project's closed out, and you have about 2 years maximum to complete the project. The next slide here shows the allocations of how the funding is broken out. 2/3 is an equal distribution for each county, and then the rest is based off your population. You'll compete countywide, not statewide, like the Trails program. These are all countywide competitions, so it makes it a little more less competitive, I guess. This would be less competitive, say, competing statewide. If you have unrequested money carry over, I think for a few cycles, then we have the ability to move that funding to another county or the next competitive program. So that's kind of a good problem to have. If your county hasn't been requesting the funding and you have a project in that county, you probably want to apply because you probably have a strong chance of receiving that money because you may be the only applicant. The next slide here is kind of hard to see, but it kind of shows you the county allocations from the 2020 allocation. So if you find your county there, you can see how much money typically you would have that you could request in any grant cycle. Let's see here. The 2020 applications were due June 1st. I would have to check with Tim and see when the 2022 applications would be due, but I would think they would be in June 1st again for next year. The next slide, you can see a spray park that was funded in Broadview Heights using NatureWorks funds. So again, these are kind of typical projects through NatureWorks that you can apply for. The next slide, we'll speak about the Land and Water Conservation Fund, and this is the federal local parks program project that we offer. I won't read and bore you with it, but the program has been around for a long time, One of the big pieces about the land and water conservation that you need to be aware about, and we'll speak about it a little later as we go through the slides, is that if you accept this funding, even if it's just for benches or signs, that property, that park property would be encumbered and have to be open to the public for recreational use in perpetuity. So if you were thinking about in 20 years selling a portion of the property, it will have to be replaced with similar property somewhere else at the current market price. I think I'm saying this right. So and it can be kind of complicated to convert property to do that. So please keep that in mind when you're trying to apply for land and water conservation fund funding, that you're pretty much saying that that property is going to be used for recreational use in perpetuity. As we move down here, we can see eligible projects under the program. We can fund acquisitions, development projects, rehabilitation, and also again, design and engineering costs as part of the overall project. And all local subdivisions of government can be project sponsors there. The match requirement is a little different on the next slide here. It's a 50-50 match. So the maximum award is $500,000, and the minimum total project cost or minimum grant request would be $50,000. So your project would have to be a minimum of $100,000 for total project cost to receive this grant. It's offered every year, and applications will be due November. Well, they were due this past November. So in 2022, well, maybe I'm reading this wrong. I'd have to talk to Tim. So it looks like the 2022 applications were due in November. I don't know when he plans to announce those, but you'd have to ask Tim about that. I apologize. And the next slide here is the 6F language, that perpetuity requirement. That is part of the program, so please keep that in mind. You can read through that. And the next slide talks about the conversion process. Should you want to convert the property or sell a portion of the property or take it out of recreational use, there is a conversion process, and it's pretty long and drawn out. So you probably want to do your research on that or ask Tim Robinson about the process if you think that may be a possibility before you apply. The next slide here, you can see some of the projects that we funded through Land and Water. The Little Miami Scenic Trail, which was pretty damaged and beat up, we were able to fund and have that portion of trail fixed and rehabilitated. The next slide can show you some acquisition projects that we were funded through the Land and Water Conservation Fund. The next slide is a 9-acre acquisition expanding a park in Twinsburg. And the next slide shows you a park in Pike County that had a lot of land and water money in. And the next one shows, I think it's spray park or shelter house. Yeah, the spray park here. And the next one is the shelter house. So in conclusion here, I'm sorry to go long here and not have all the information about the local parks projects, but here's our contact information, my contact information at Tim Robinson. You know, please reach out to us, call us. We're always willing to help you. We'd rather help you on the front end so you can put in a strong application and be competitive than to have to reapply next year and have to go through, you know, all that time and effort. So please call us with any ideas, any questions, or any eligibility questions. Even if you have other funding opportunities, you should call us and see how our programs match up and how that mechanism would work, matching funds from state and federal programs. So again, I thank you for your time. Appreciate being on this call. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Hi, Dewan. We have 2 questions that have been submitted so far. The first one, they want to know, do the trails funded under your programs need to be designed to ODOT and/or ADA standards?
If they have ODOT funding, it would have to be designed to ODOT standards. In that case, we would probably be coming in as a matching source. If it was strictly they're just using our dollars to fund the project, there's no policy that the trail has to be constructed to ODOT standards. Currently, we do prefer that ADA standards are adhered to But if not, if it could not, we would request that proper signage be put up so any populations that would be impacted because of the project not being to ADA standards would know that going in to the trail or at the trailhead area or on somebody's website, so they're not caught in a bad situation like getting stuck on a trail and have to be evacuated or something, or maybe slopes that are too steep for them or whatnot. There's all kinds of possibilities there. So that's the long way of saying ADA, we suggest that yes, ODOT standards, not typically, you don't have to follow those standards through the Clean Ohio Trails Fund.
Okay, the second question is, can acquisition and development be included in the same application for any of these programs?
On the trail side, we don't like to have acquisition and construction in the same grant proposal because acquisition can get sticky. It can be drawn out and complicated at times. The only way we would usually fund an acquisition piece and construction together if it's just like small little easements that are needed to construct the trail, like 10-foot wide, 15-year easements on property in front of someone's house. Maybe we may entertain that, but if there are larger acquisition pieces or a lot of parcels, we would ask that you separate those two requests out, separate the construction piece out from the acquisition and try the acquisition first, because again, acquisition can delay a project a long time. I mean, years. I've seen it happen in the past. So we don't want to keep our money tied up because the acquisition piece is going to take longer and push the construction side back.
And Dwan, that's related to the timeline, right? Like the 15 months for Clean Ohio Trails Fund.
Yes, that's been 15 months, yes.
Thank you very much. That was the end of the current questions. So turn things back over to Jeff Shaner.
All right, thanks, Dwan. Up next, we have Jordan Whisler, who will talk about trail and sidewalk opportunities for areas of Ohio inside of MPOs. So, Jordan.
Thanks, Jeff. Do you see my screen okay?
Yeah, I see it fine.
Great. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Jordan Whisler, and I manage the statewide planning section within ODOT's Office of Statewide Planning and Research. And today I've been asked to provide an overview of the MPO and Large City Capital Program and its relationships to pedestrian and bicycle projects. So just at a high level, what is the MPO and Large City Capital Program? Well, every year through this program, ODOT suballocates, both because we're required to, as well as in a discretionary sense, around $211 million in federal funding to Ohio's 17 metropolitan planning organizations, or MPOs, in 5 large cities within Ohio. And large cities are defined here to be cities between 25,000 and 50,000 in population. And you can see these agencies reflected here on the right side of this screen. These agencies locally manage their respective allocation of these capital dollars, so they're responsible for working with local public agencies within their respective regions to finance local government-sponsored multimodal transportation improvement projects. And I'll go into exactly what that means here in a second, but that absolutely includes trails and pedestrian and bicycle projects overall. These 22 agencies receive some combination of 3 federal fund types. This includes Surface Transportation Block Grant Funds, or STPG dollars. These are some of the most flexible federal funds the state of Ohio receives in terms of transportation funding. They can be used to finance a wide variety of multimodal transportation maintenance and operations and new construction improvements. 23 USC 133 outlines some of the eligible project types under this fund type, but again, STPG funds can be used to fund pedestrian and bicycle projects. Agencies also may receive an allocation of congestion mitigation and air quality funds, or CMAQ funds. These funds can be used to finance transportation projects in air quality areas. And air quality areas are areas of the state that are either a non-attainment or maintenance for certain transportation related criterion pollutants. And so CMAQ funds can be used to fund projects that help reduce mobile source emissions within those areas. And again, that includes pedestrian and bicycle projects. But if you're interested in learning more about other eligible project types for CMAQ, you can look at 23 USC 149. And some agencies also receive allocations of Transportation Alternative Program funds, or TAP funds. These funds can be used to finance transportation system, historical, scenic, environmental mitigation, and pedestrian and bicycle projects. For the most part, we see these funds being used by these agencies to fund pedestrian and bicycle projects here within Ohio. But as I mentioned, these agencies receive some combination of these three federal fund types that they allocate out to local projects within their regions. In terms of which funds these agencies are receiving, each MPO is going to receive access to STPG or TA funds. There are 4 MPOs within the state of Ohio that choose to return their allocation of TAP funds back to ODOT and then participate within the statewide program that Jeff will talk about here later today. And then those 4 agencies and the local jurisdictions within them obviously have to apply for projects and compete for projects in a way that's consistent with our statewide program. Again, agencies or areas of the state that are covered by MPOs that are in attainment and maintenance for criterion pollutants will also receive an allocation of CMAQ funds. The 8 large MPOs, the MPOs that cover the largest 8 metropolitan areas within the state, collectively manage an allocation of CMAQ, and then the smaller MPOs have their own individual allocations, and then large cities receive an allocation of STPG funds. The important thing to keep in mind, I'll reiterate this point at least one more time here today, is that the individual MPOs and cities are serving as the project managers for these funds. They are the ones that are responsible for establishing their multi-year programs of local government-sponsored projects. They are the ones that are responsible for monitoring project development milestones, schedules, and estimates, working with our district offices and local public agencies, and they're the ones that are responsible for locking down annual programs of project awards within the available budgets that they have been provided. And the expectation is that each of these MPOs in large cities are delivering an annual program of project awards that are on schedule, that they're on scope, and that they're on budget, and that they're maintaining minimal carry forward balances, that the funds that are being allocated out through these agencies is ultimately getting into the hands of local governments to develop projects within the state of Ohio. And so you may be asking yourself, how are these agencies selecting which projects to fund, and maybe even specifically pedestrian and bicycle projects? And the answer to that is it varies, that each MPO adopts its own program management and project solicitation policies, procedures, and schedules. If you take anything away from this presentation today, it's really that you should reach out and contact your local MPO for additional details if you already don't have an established relationship with them. And then the large cities are managing their own programs and projects. While that, overall the programs may vary from individual MPO to individual MPO, there are a couple of universal items to keep in mind as it relates to these funds. Generally, we're looking at an 80% federal participation rate across these 3 fund types, with a 20% project sponsor match requirement. So an 80-20 split on these funds. There may be some regions of the state that increase the federal participation rate, maybe on certain project types such as safety, or use things like toll revenue credit to increase that federal participation rate higher. But generally, again, you're looking at an 80-20 split on these funds within different regions. And so, in a little bit of a recap, how do you secure MPO funding for projects? Again, contact your local MPO capital program manager, and they will be able to provide more details on these funds, what's available in the region, specific to pedestrian and bicycle related projects, how it is you might apply for them and when they would be available. Would also highly recommend reviewing your MPO's webpage. Many of them maintain robust websites that have a ton of great information on them that will help you become familiar with the project solicitation schedule, with the project scoring criteria, and ultimately how to submit these funding projects and requests. Would also encourage you to complete the ODOT LPA qualification e-learning training modules, and you can see the link on this screen here. But really, that's to continue to help establish a reputation as a local government that the MPOs can work with to deliver and implement projects on schedule, on budget, and within scope. And the last just thing I would mention, if you haven't gotten in contact with your MPO or aren't really participating within their committee process, we just encourage you to check it out and potentially get involved. MPOs at a high level are responsible for long-range transportation planning within their regions, and they're going to be funding projects that can help achieve the long-range goals. And so the more that you and your community are involved within your local MPO, the more you'll understand some of the regional needs and even be able to inform those and potentially be able to compete for projects and project funding down the line. Just in terms of a quick snapshot in terms of last fiscal year and the projects that were funded, the construction projects that were funded through the program, outlaid about $154 million in investments in urban areas within the state. You can see the project types that these went to, things like rehab and reconstruction, which may have included things like sidewalks or bike lanes. There was 26 standalone pedestrian and bicycle projects funded through this program last year. And again, these would have been standalone facilities for just pedestrians and bicyclists, as well as 25 safety projects that may have had some pedestrian and bicycle component as well. There was also 9 public transit projects, including things like bus replacements and planning projects. So I know that was a little high level. You are obviously welcome to reach out to myself here at ODOT, but would again encourage you to get in contact with your local MPO if you're interested in understanding the capital funding that they have available. You would be able to do a quick Google search, Ohio MPOs or ODOT Metropolitan Planning Organizations, and find a list of their contacts on our website. But that's all I have here today, and I'm happy to answer any questions that folks may have.
Jordan, we have one question that's been submitted so far. It says, referencing a state-owned bridge within a city in the MPO, would route maintenance on the sidewalks on the bridge be eligible for STBG?
Would bridge maintenance be eligible and potentially sidewalk maintenance be eligible for that? Is that the question?
Route maintenance on the sidewalks on the bridge.
Yeah. Potentially, and again, would encourage you to reach out to your local MPO. Some MPOs are making funds available for things like maintenance projects overall, some potentially not. So depending on what area of the state is, it is potentially an eligible project.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. That was the only question we have so far. So we'll turn things back over to Jeff Shaner.
Thanks.
All right, thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Victoria. Now up is Kate Harley. Kate Harley. I apologize for I don't even know what was going on, Kate. I'm very, very sorry for that. Safe routes to school, Kate Harley.
Yeah, rumor had it that Kate Winslow was going to be here today, but unfortunately, it's just me. Kate Harley, I manage ODOT's Safe Routes to School funding program, and today I'm going to give you an overview of the program in general, talk a little bit about funding eligibility, run through some information related to our 2022 application, which is opening next month. And then wrap up with just a couple resources that are available related to Safe Routes to School. So just overall, the goal of our Safe Routes to School program here at ODOT is to provide funding to facilitate the development and implementation of projects and activities that enable and encourage children to walk or bike to school safely. So everything we do relates to this goal, the projects that we fund, the way we run this program is really to be able to enable and encourage kids to walk and bike to school safely. And with that in mind, we do provide project funding for both infrastructure projects, so engineering and construction, making changes to the built environment, as well as non-infrastructure projects. So some of those other things related to education and programming that are going to help, create a culture of walking and biking to school and support families and students in doing that safely. So just a couple things that are required in order to be eligible to compete for Safe Routes to School funding specifically. So the projects that are eligible to come into the program need to be projects that have been identified in some kind of plan. In many cases, those are school travel plans, which is a dedicated planning process dedicated to the needs of students walking and biking to school. But these are potentially projects that could be identified in other planning efforts, whether these are just local comprehensive plans or long-range transportation plans, whether your community's developed an active transportation plan or something equivalent. We're looking for these plans to have been developed or updated within the past 5 years. And we also would like for these planning approaches to be comprehensive in nature. So outlining things that are both infrastructure related as well as non-infrastructure related. So that's the first requirement in order to be eligible. And then there's a couple other things that need to be done in order to be eligible as well. One of those things is to have your 2-mile radius maps developed, and ODOT can help you develop these. Some locals develop these on their own, or sometimes they'll work with some of their regional planning organizations, but ODOT's always able to help you develop these maps as long as you submit your student addresses to us. And this is just important because we're really looking to understand potential impact on students, and the most competitive applications for projects tend to be the ones where the majority of students live within 2 miles. So making sure that that data is available is an important part of your application. And then the last thing which needs to be done is information on student travel as well as caregiver input needs to be documented. And there's a variety of ways in which you can do this. This can be supplemental to some of the plans that you might already have in place or might occur during your planning process. But we do ask that communities have information to share on how students currently travel to school, and also, have engaged critical school stakeholders, parents, caregivers, students, to get their input on student travel. And that just helps us to understand that the projects that you are outlining are projects that are going to address people's concerns and really move the needle and make it possible for kids to walk and bike to school. So I do get a decent amount of questions related to this specific data collection. So just wanted to talk a little bit more specifically about the flexibility here. So the first thing that we're looking for, like I mentioned, is understanding typical walking and biking rates. We do have tallies that you can use that we host online. These are like in-person student tallies where students actually raise their hand in the classroom and report to their teacher how they got to school. But we absolutely accept other types of data collection efforts as well, whether you do other types of counts or surveys or interviews with key personnel. And you can submit this data if this was collected, during a planning process that was completed a couple years before, you can still submit that data within 5 years, just as long as your schools haven't relocated. Some of this information is also collected through the caregiver surveys, the parent or caregiver surveys. So you might be able to mine this data out of those surveys, but depending on, how many surveys you're getting back, it's often useful to do some other types of collection efforts to kind of supplement that. And then in terms of engaging caregivers and parents, again, we host a survey that you are absolutely welcome to use. You can use, again, data from previous planning efforts, but you might also want to consider other ways of engaging these people through surveys or interviews or focus groups. Any of these things can be used to document input from parents and caregivers. This is what the surveys look like. So we actually house them on our website, and when you go to share them with communities, they will actually navigate to these websites and take these surveys. And then that data comes to me, and when you're done promoting the survey, I send that data to you so that you understand all of the responses, and we also provide a quick analysis of some of the data. Okay, so for the 2022 application, for those of you who have applied to Safe Routes to School in the past or have some familiarity with the program, the 2022 application process is very, very, very similar. So you'll be completing this application online through our FormStack website. The application window is going to be the same time period. It'll open the first Monday of January. It'll close the first Friday of March. Communities can apply for infrastructure projects, for non-infrastructure projects, or both. And they also have an opportunity to apply for school travel plan development assistance if that's something that they're interested in. And then from a timeline perspective, these applications are due March 4th. We typically do an invite-only project presentation opportunity in April with our selection committee, and then we tend to make our notice of awards by June. So you can expect a very similar process this year as well. The Safe Routes to School program does provide funding for infrastructure projects. So these projects need to be within 2 miles of schools that include kids in grades K through 8. The project cap for infrastructure projects is still $400,000. So your project might be more than $400,000, but that's the amount, that's the maximum amount that ODOT would contribute to the project. And so this could include things like sidewalks, like bike facilities, shared use paths. This could include things that make crossings safer as well. I also tend to get questions about bike facilities, and just, we mentioned that because our audience is that K through 8 audience, we're looking for facilities that are going to be comfortable for the students. So if you want to talk more about that or have questions or project examples, absolutely feel free to reach out to me or reach out to your district Safe Routes to School coordinator for some feedback and direction on that. So what we're offering in the 2022 application is for infrastructure projects, construction funding will be available in fiscal year 2025. So same as always, the infrastructure projects should be sponsored by whoever the local jurisdiction is with the appropriate maintenance authority. So for projects that are going to take place on city streets, we would be looking for the city to apply for that and be the project sponsor, just as an example. So whoever is the appropriate local sponsor would be the one applying for that project. What makes the Safe Routes to School program somewhat unique is we do have the ability to reimburse for up to 100% of eligible costs. So there is no local match requirement, and we can fund these up to 100% using both federal funding as well as our toll revenue credits. The other thing that's unique is we also provide funding for all phases of project development if that is of interest to a community. So you can apply for Safe Routes to School funding just for construction, or you can apply for it to include all phases from engineering through design, right-of-way, construction, and construction engineering. So the bulk of your project award would be for construction in 2025, but we would be able to provide funding for these other phases leading up to that time. So just a couple of things to expect as you're thinking about your application. All of this information is in the 2022 application guidance, but there's going to be several attachments that will be required for infrastructure projects. So we're looking to see, where this project is identified in a plan. We ask for a letter of support from your regional planning organization if you belong to one. A project countermeasure map, a photo of existing conditions. We require certified cost estimates to be submitted with these projects as well. So we want to understand how much each phase of your project is expected to cost, and we want these costs to include contingency and inflation. The other thing we're looking for is a budget breakdown. So this just helps us understand what your request looks like for each project phase, the year that this would happen, and if you have any other funding contributions. So for some projects, if you're getting some money from your MPO or from your local, but you need some additional funding from Safe Routes to School, you'll be able to indicate what that looks like in your budget breakdown. And then we'll have you attach the 2-mile student maps, which we also put crash data in. We'll look for some what we call proof of progress. So, you know, what have you been doing related to Safe Routes to School locally, and assigned ordinance from the local community that's applying. We also provide funding for non-infrastructure. So these are really activities to improve safety or encourage walking and biking to school related to education, encouragement, enforcement, or evaluation. The funding in our non-infrastructure projects is really intended to develop and implement projects that are sustainable past the availability of funding. So we're looking to, we fund projects for non-infrastructure up to $60,000. These include activities related to walking school buses and Walking Wednesday programs, just as examples, hosting bike rodeos, getting supplies for a crossing guard program, driver safety campaigns, these types of things. We do also have some project limits related to the number of schools which you might be working with. So whether it's up to 10, 11 to 25, or our large school districts over 26 schools. The other thing to note is that while construction funding isn't available for a few years, our non-infrastructure funding is available next year. So this funding is available more immediately, and it is available in fiscal year 23, which comes up in July. Project sponsors for non-infrastructure projects can be any political subdivision. So whether it's city, village, township, county, school district, health district, these are all considered political subdivisions. In some instances, we're also will consider providing funding to nonprofits that are working closely with schools or communities on Safe Routes to School related work. So you can definitely chat with us about that. But if you have a nonprofit that's really active in this work in your community, they might be able to apply and be the project sponsor for a non-infrastructure project. Again, we can reimburse up to 100% of eligible costs, and funding is really intended to develop and implement plans, programs, policies, and environments that are sustainable into the future. Couple other things just to note as you're pulling together your application. Again, a set of attachments will be required, you know, demonstrating where this is in your plan, a budget, your maps, proof of progress, and then we do require letters of support. So if the school is applying for this, then you don't need a letter of support from the school, but if it's anybody else is applying for this work, we do require a letter of support from the school district, just to, you know, show that there's school buy-in for this work, even if they're not the ones that are spearheading some of the programs. And then assigned ordinance as well. And for all of our applications, we're really looking to score based on several major goals. So, you know, how we're going to improve connectivity, improve safety, how we will address high need for walking and biking, the potential for trips. So, you know, demonstrating that there's the potential to encourage more kids to walk and bike in the future, as well as community commitment. So we're looking to make sure that those who are applying and receiving funds have the capacity to implement the projects and sustain them in the future. Couple lists. Couple things related to ineligible activities, just so you know. I mean, this funding is pretty flexible. There's a lot of things we can do with this funding from an infrastructure and non-infrastructure perspective, but there are a few things where we have limitations. And of course, any project that does not specifically relate to enabling or encouraging kids to walk and bike to school is not eligible. But we also do not provide funding for food and beverage or food and beverage gift cards. bicycles, giveaways with no safety or education value, reoccurring costs. So examples of this would be like a crossing guard salary year after year. So if we are providing funding for things like program coordinators or other type of personnel funding, we look to we're able to provide funding for that in year one, but we can't provide 100% funding for reoccurring salaries that are providing the same role. So if you're expanding your program or working with new schools, that's different, but to do reoccurring program coordinator salaries, you wouldn't be able to get 100% funding for that after year one. The other thing to note is we are typically not funding projects whose only purpose would be to upgrade curb ramps or to replace schools. And then last but not least, we also provide an opportunity to request school travel plan development assistance. So this is limited assistance, but it's available for communities or schools and their partners to develop a school travel plan. So we would provide this in the form of either ODOT task order consultant assistance, or potentially could reimburse the jurisdiction or the school that would be leading the school travel plan. For those of you who might just be looking to do a plan for one of your schools, we definitely encourage you to look at all of the resources that we have available for developing a school travel plan. We'll typically be utilizing this type of assistance to do school travel plans for multiple schools in the community. And somewhat similar to the other applications, sorry, this should say school travel plan applications will require only a cost estimate if you're requesting reimbursement. If you are just requesting consultant assistance, you don't need to include a cost estimate. But then we look for information on free and reduced lunch. We either want you to send us your student address data so that we can develop your maps, or if you already have the maps developed, you can just submit those. And then we need letters of support from your regional planning organization if you're in one, your local jurisdiction, and your school district. So these letters of support are a requirement for all three, unless you're not in an MPO or RTPO. And assigned ordinance. This is what our maps look like. So for those of you who need to have your maps created, we just ask that you send us this set of data, the school of your student, the grade, address, city, and zip code. We will not accept any information with student names, and we prefer for you to send this to us in Excel. A couple other resources just to put on your radar. We have school travel plan guidelines, how to develop a school travel plan. We also have a template that you can fill out that's really just step-by-step how to develop a school travel plan. We've also recently just published a new active transportation plan development guide. So this also includes a template. So depending on what plan might be most appropriate for your community or what you're most interested in, these resources are available to you online. And we also have workshops related to both of these through our Active Transportation Academy. Related to Safe Routes to School, we also have our non-infrastructure and infrastructure toolkit online. And through our AT Academy, we also have some other Safe Routes to School related training. So these include crossing guard trainings, Girls in Gear, walking school bus are notably more Safe Routes to School related. But we also have some community workshops related to planning, whether it's a school travel plan, active transportation plan, as well as a recently updated course where we help you to develop to conduct a walk audit. So feel free to tap those resources as well. And if you're interested in applying, these are really your next steps. Talk with your district Safe Routes to School coordinator about the project. These folks can really give you feedback. They can look at some of your estimates, let you know if there's any red flags or if there's anything you need to dig into a little bit more. We definitely want to help, get the best projects through our door. So if you have questions, I think a theme of this webinar has been reach out, get feedback. We definitely want to help point you guys in the right direction with funding and with projects. And then if you haven't read the 2022 application guidance, I would absolutely recommend that you do that. The website at the bottom of my slide in the footer is actually the correct website. So definitely visit that. You don't need to wait for the application to open in January to know what's in the application, because all of those questions and attachments are outlined within that guidance. And then just be ready to apply online before March 4th. And when you're filling out your form stack, just know that this is noted in the application, but the form stack cannot save data for more than 30 days. So don't start your application on January 3rd and not touch it again until March 1st, because it might lose that data. So you only have 30 days to be able to save information in the application, and you cannot save attachments if you want to go in and out of your application. So please assemble all of your attachments and then only upload those when you're ready to submit. Here are your list of district safe routes to school coordinators. So if you have questions about applying or questions about the program or what might be competitive, don't hesitate to reach out and get some feedback from your district coordinators. They are a wealth of knowledge and are always going to be able to give you some good feedback and direction on that. Their information is also listed online on the Safe Routes to School website. And here is my contact information as well. Any questions, Victoria?
Yes, actually, we have quite a few that's come in. What I'm going to do is prioritize the ones that are specific to state routes, safe routes to school for you right now. And then we have some that are more general for everybody that I will hold until after Jeff Shaner's presentation. So your first question is, if a school district has a current transportation policy in place where all the students have access to busing, will this hurt the district with any applications?
No. If all students are eligible for busing, we are still, that does not impact your level of competitiveness for the program. What's more important would just be the potential for students to be able to walk and bike, so within 2 miles.
Okay, next question. How recent do safe routes to school plans need to be for applying for projects? They want to know specifically, do safe routes to school plans age out?
So we do look for these to be updated within 5 years. And we actually have some like how to update your school travel plan tips online. So if there hasn't been a ton of changes, it might be pretty simple to update your school travel plan if your schools have stayed in the same location, if there's, sort of similar priorities and projects, you might be able to re-engage the schools, do some of your surveying, collect some of that data, and it might be a pretty simple process to update, but that's all outlined online on our tips for updating.
Great. And the last question.
5 years. Did I say that? 5 years.
No, you didn't, but I'm glad you did. All right. The last question for right now is, what is the turnaround time to obtain the 2-mile radius map once you submit your info to ODOT?
We can typically get this done within 2 weeks. If you're interested in applying and you need your maps done, definitely get those to me as soon as possible, because it might be difficult for us if we get a lot of requests at the same time in February. So get those to me ASAP. We should be able to turn them around pretty quickly, but at least within 2 weeks.
Sounds great. Thank you. I'm going to turn things back over to Jeff Shaner for now.
All right, thanks, Kate. Thanks, Victoria. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks. All right, I'm going to go over the Transportation Alternatives Program for the areas not inside of MPOs for the state of Ohio. The rural program is the one that I manage. We get an annual allocation of $11 million. The applicants must not be within an MPO, excuse me, except for the 4 that Jordan mentioned earlier, and those 4 are Allen County, Belmont County, Licking County, and Washington County. any municipality in those areas would apply for funding that I manage, not the MPOs. Federal funding is normally split out at 80% federal and 20% local. However, right now we are using toll revenue credit. So the federal funding is 95% with the local match being only 5%. This funding cycle for 2021, 2022 will be funding projects for our fiscal year of 2025. So there are 2 more application periods after this year's cycle that will still be at the 95-5 split. However, anything after those years are going to revert back to 80% and 20%. People who can apply, local governments, RTPOs, federal and state resource agencies. The projects must demonstrate a public benefit. They have to be accessible to the general public or a broad segment of the public, be available for public use throughout its reasonable life, which is for our TAP program, we like to say 20 years. I know in the ODNR section, Dewan was listing 15 years, excuse me, but for ODOT, we go with the 20-year reasonable life, and the projects must be on publicly owned or existing publicly owned right-of-way. Local cash must be committed and identified. For that, we like to see a resolution with the application submitted as a attachment. There has to be a commitment to maintain the project after the construction is complete. This does not have to necessarily be the government or the MPO or the municipality that applied for the project. If there's like a Boy Scout troop or something like that that wants to sort of like clean the highway programs that are throughout the state, they could sponsor a section of cleaning up the trail for the municipality. We also make sure that there have been no major maintenance issues or past performance with a municipality receiving a grant in the past. So if a project got delayed for whatever reason, if a project was supposed to be built in fiscal year 2020, but needed to be pushed out to 2021 or 2022, that could possibly have a negative connotation with any kind of applications that the municipality would submit in the future. These are the type of projects that the TAP program can fund: bicycle and pedestrian trails and facilities, rail trails. We'll get into a little bit about that. That's just a little bit different. Safe routes for non-drivers. This is going to be sidewalk projects. Other community improvements. These are kind of the historical rehabilitations. Maybe it's a covered bridge, or we've done locks before. The projects need to be on or eligible for the historic registry. And finally, the last category of projects would be environmental mitigation. This is just lists some of the types of bicycle and pedestrian projects. So on or off-road trail facilities for pedestrians or bicyclists, sidewalks, trails, signals, traffic calming techniques, lighting, and other safety-related infrastructure and transportation projects are all eligible under this category. The rail trails, Dewan also mentioned part of this in his presentation. These are abandoned rail corridors that the rail companies may still own, but no active trains are going across the tracks. This is the one category where construction is not the only eligible phase for TAP projects. We can actually supply, or not supply, but award the funding for the acquisition of these trails. Just however, I will caution, these projects take a long time. Dewan also mentioned some issues with right-of-way project acquisitions. So you kind of are in a double bind here with the railroads. If you are applying for acquisition of these properties, please make sure you've started talking to the railroad and have a good relationship with them. These kind of projects can quickly get out of hand, and before you know it, even though fiscal year 2025 seems like a far way off, you'll blink your eye and you still will be dealing with some of these rail issues. Again, safe routes for non-drivers. These are a lot of infrastructure related projects for sidewalks. Also mentioned community improvements. So you can see the picture. This is an old rail depot. The other picture is of a lock. So landscaping, scenic enhancement features, junkyard removal and screening are also eligible for TAP funding. Environmental mitigation, we get very, very few of these. This is to address stormwater management, reduce vehicle-caused wildlife mortality, and restore and maintain connectivity among aquatic habitats. Two years ago, there were abbreviated safety applications that started in our safety department. I believe they are still available. You can apply for them whenever you would want to. The cap was 500,000 2 years ago, but I believe now, and Kate can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's $250,000 now for the abbreviated safety applications. When the TAP projects are being reviewed, we have members from the safety team from ODOT who sit on the committee that is awarding the funding, and they have the ability to award some safety funds. So last year we started putting a safety section in the TAP application, and it's been expanded a little bit just so the safety team can really see what this project is bringing in regards to safety. So please be specific as possible when you are completing the safety section of the application. Last year, just for example, we had 5 projects that were awarded safety funds. So that was an additional just over $2 million that were awarded for projects. So that just helps us be able to afford to award funding to more projects. So we really appreciate the safety team's ability to help us out. Tips for applications. We at ODOT really recommend funding with multiple funding sources. As an example, TAP in small city. But there are obviously other programs that fit well with TAP. We also like to break up projects. While there is no real set hard cap, the kind of soft cap that we like to see is no more than $101.5 million per project. Just like to spread out the funding a little bit more, and as soon as you start talking about $2.5 million projects, that really eats into the $11 million that we have pretty quick. So anything with maybe a $2.53 million estimate, look to phase the project if possible. Finally, make sure that the estimate is a really decent estimate. I know we are forecasting for fiscal year 2025, and right now we're seeing costs go up due to inflation and just scarcity of resources. Just make sure when you are getting your estimates that you include inflation, like 3 or 4% per year will be what I expect to see in an estimate. Combination of application programs. This is just an example from 2019. The city of Urbana, they submitted, I think, a $3 million project when it was all said and done. TAP was awarded them $750,000. Small city awarded them $1.3 million. And safety kicked in $500,000 in each program when they were funding. So $500,000 from TAP, and then another $500,000 from the small city. So safety awarded them a total of $1 million. So all in all, their $3 million project, they got $2.5-ish million funded in federal funds from the three different funding sources in ODOT. This is the timetable for the TAP applications. It's a two-tier process. The letters of interest are due in the month of October. The link goes out and opens on October 1st, and the letters of interest are due on October 31st. The month of November, I will screen the letters of interest to make sure that all the projects are eligible for federal funding, and I send out the invitation links on December 1st. The application process is open now. Like I just said, it opened on December 1st, and it will close on January 31st of 2022. This year, I hope to have everything scored and have the committee meeting and award the projects, hopefully in April when the governance board meeting happens. Some of the other ODOT programs, these are just the cycles. Safe Routes to School, as Kate just said, is January 1st through March 4th. Ohio Bridge Partnership is March 1st through April 15th. Small City is May 1st through June 15th, and the Municipal Bridge Program is July 1st through August 15th. These are just a couple of outside of ODOT resources. Dwan Hammonds, who you heard earlier from the Natural Resources, Ohio Public Works Commission, they are a good opportunity for state funds, which can be used as the 5% match for local funds. And then Federal Highway, Daniel Brodhag, I'm sorry if I mispronounced his name. There are RAISE grant, which was formerly the Bill grants. This is a good source of grant money for larger projects. If, for example, like the $3 million projects or anything above that, really, I would recommend that you look into RAISE grants. They have the ability to fund, like I said, the higher dollar amounts where we cannot. There are two classifications of projects in rural populations. That's going to be anywhere under 200,000 residents, and urban populations, which is going to be greater than 200,000 residents. And there are minimums, so the rural population projects have to be over $1 million, and the urban population projects have to be greater than $5 million. But those are awarded annually, and those links will take you to the website on the FHWA website. Some resources that we have on the local programs website. If you click on the links, that will take you to the Transportation Alternative Program homepage, where you can find the guidance, and it should be able to answer any of your questions. If not, you can always reach out to me. We also have an ODOT resource guide. If you click the link there, that will take you to a booklet where you can discover some of the other funding options that ODOT has available, not necessarily just for trails and sidewalks, just for a variety of your other transportation projects. Right now, if you look at the guide, it says, I believe, spring of 2021. We have recently updated it, and we are getting the new information onto our website, hopefully within the week. It should be up there before the first of the year, but it just may be a little bit late due to the people's schedules around the holidays. So that is everything I have. We can open it up to any of your questions, Victoria. Just
Great.
one thing to mention real quick. I know this might come up with the federal bill that has been passed. Our office has been in contact with ODOT's Office of Finance, and we are still digesting all the information that is contained in the bill. We're still also waiting for a little bit of guidance from Federal Highway. So at this point in time, we do not know if any of these funding programs that we have just spoken about are going to receive any additional funding from the bill. We can make that information available as soon as we hear anything. So with that, I can open up the questions to anyone from the presentations from Dewan, Kate, Jordan, or myself.
Good. And Jeff, actually, you addressed the top question on the list. So thank you for answering that about the funding bill. There was a question that was asked of pretty much everybody, so maybe each of you could take turns answering this. But one of the audience members wanted to know, what are some of the most common mistakes you see in applications?
I guess I can go first. I kind of hit on it with dealing with some of the, like if there's railroad or any kind of land acquisition that needs to be done on projects. Just dealing with some of the private companies, they have their own timetable. They adhere to it when they want to. So if right away is needed, just make sure you're allotting enough time for that, just so the project runs smooth, that when 2025 for this project cycle comes around, the projects are ready to go and everything is nice and smooth.
I think from the Safe Routes to School perspective, sometimes I think one of the challenges can be project applicants that underestimate some of the costs associated with their project. So, we definitely spend a lot of time talking about estimates and making sure that things look appropriate. It can be really challenging for us to want to take on a project that seems kind of high risk in terms of budget or cost overages. So I think just anything you can do to have a good handle on potential costs associated with the project is really helpful. Sometimes I think communities might think that their project will be more competitive if it's just simply cheaper, but really it's just about really matching the project to what we think the impact is and the cost of the work. It's not an issue to request the full $400,000. We just want to make sure that we truly think we can do the project for that amount and feel good about the impact it's going to have on the community compared to the investment, and that we're going to be able to get it done with that amount of funding. So I hope that kind of makes sense.
This is Dewan Hammonds again. I think the more frustrating thing that I see with applicants and project sponsors is not engaging the public ahead of time. We suggest reaching out to the public and explaining the proposed project and gaining feedback and suggestions from the public at large, and more specifically, people who will be impacted by the project that are near the project. So say property owners. So if you're going to build a trail in the right of way that the property owner doesn't own, but it's going to impact the front of their property or what they perceive as their property, you want to get feedback and suggestions from them and incorporate their suggestions in your project on the front end. Because what happens is if you receive a grant and it's a great project, you receive a grant from us, and when the public hears about it, they're going to be up in arms because they weren't included in it. And then they're going to make a huge stink about the project to where the project gets stalled 3 or 4 or 5 years. You may have to even get back the funding, and it benefits no one in those situations. So incorporate the public as much as you can at the beginning of your proposal before you apply is my suggestion to everyone.
This is Jordan. From my perspective, a lot of things have already been mentioned, but securing good cost estimates and a good understanding of project outlays is going to be important. And then I think one of the things we see a lot is just a lack of understanding of right-of-way impacts and potentially what that will do to both project costs and schedule as well.
Thank you. Next question is for Dewan. Could a project application for the Clean Ohio Trail Fund be for multiple jurisdictions?
Yes, it can be. The problem you would have with, not a problem, but the situation that you would have there is in multiple jurisdictions, you're going to probably have multiple property owners. So then we need to figure out who's going to be the applicant, because the applicant needs to be the property, the person or entity that owns the property eventually. So if you have a trail going through 3 jurisdictions with 3 different municipalities owning the property, are they going to give one municipality an easement on their property for 15 years to build the trail? If not, if they don't want to do that, we're in a position where we may need to have multiple project sponsors on the project as the applicant. And in that case, we then need an MOU between all the entities or jurisdictions to see, to spell out which each entity is going to do, who's going to be the fiscal arm, who's going to be the project manager, and that all needs to be spelled out. So it can get kind of complicated, but we've seen it work well in the past. At the end of the day, it comes down to, again, to the property, who's going to have ownership of the property, and who's going to eventually be the fiscal arm of the grant construction project also. So it's a good question, and we see it from time to time, but it's not a deal stopper.
Thank you. Okay, Kate, I have some questions for you. First off, they want to know about the 30 days on the application. They said, is it 30 days from the first time you type something in, or does the 30 days reset?
If you don't touch the application for 30 days, it'll lose information. So you'll be able to go into this application on FormStack and you'll be able to save your work if that's how you'd like to do it. But if you do not click Save Again for 30 days, you'll lose your information.
Great clarification. And then another person wanted to know, in some school districts on the urban-rural boundary, is there a percentage of district area that has to be suitable for walkers?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure, I can repeat it. In some districts on the urban-rural boundary, is there a percentage of district area that has to be suitable for walkers?
Okay, I might have to follow up on that question. I think the answer might relate to the percentage of kids that walk and bike, but I'm not sure. So just in general, our more competitive projects will demonstrate the most opportunity to support walking and biking trips. So just looking for that, like majority of students within 2 miles, but I'm not sure if that's exactly getting to the question. So maybe I can follow up with that person more specifically later.
Absolutely, and we'll be providing all of our presenters a list of these questions along with who asked them so they can follow up. Oh, they put a follow-up in there. Or can each school within the district apply on their own and have their own plan?
Can each district apply on their own? So
can each school within the district apply on their own?
Yeah, for non-infrastructure projects, multiple schools I think I get the question. So if there's maybe like a plan that, you know, crosses boundaries, involves multiple school districts or multiple communities, that, you know, if that plan is outlining projects for which the school might be the appropriate applicant, you know, non-infrastructure programming, perhaps a project that's on their property, they could use that plan to apply. If there's another project identified within that plan that a different school district wanted to apply for, they could do that as well. Same with different jurisdictions. If there's like more of a regional plan that's been done and one of the cities wants to apply for a project that's on one of their city streets, they could do that. If the township that's also involved had a project on one of their streets, they could use that plan to become eligible to apply as well.
Thank you. The next person wanted to know, what is the difference between the categories bicycle and pedestrian facilities and safe routes for non-drivers?
Technically, they're FHWA lumps them together. It's just non-drivers. We typically look at those as sidewalk projects, whereas a bicycle facility is going to be more a shared path where bikes and walkers and people with strollers and all of that kind of stuff use the facility, where, like I said, the non-motorized is just more or less a sidewalk.
Okay, and I'm not sure who would like to take this question, Jeff, yourself or Kate, but someone would like to know, will funds from the new infrastructure bill for pedestrian bike facilities run through this program, or will a new program be set up?
As far as I know, oh, go ahead, Kate.
I think the answer is that we are planning the information we're providing on our programs today, we're planning to run these programs as we've presented them this year, unless more information becomes available. But I think that's kind of the thing you all need to know. But feel free to add to that, Jeff, if you want.
No, I was going to say the same thing. It's my understanding that these programs are going to be carried forward, and I have not heard of any new programs being spelled out in the new bill.
Okay, and then for each of you, does prior funding from your programs impact future funding awarded?
I can go first. It does not. Where it will come into effect is we like to spread out the money throughout the state. If a community has received an award, like if they were awarded funds this year, with the amount of applications that we receive and the amount of money being requested in the applications, we tend not to fund municipalities in back-to-back years. We like to make sure that everything is running smooth on the project that has been awarded. Once maybe like the PS&E or the once the project gets closer to being constructed, is when we would probably look to fund the same municipality again. So if it's a phase 2 or if it's another project altogether, that's the rule we kind of follow with TAP. But I'll let Kate and Dwan speak to their programs.
Sure, I would say from a Safe Routes to School perspective, not really. I do collect that information in the application, just to understand what other projects might be in the works. But we're really just typically looking to choose the projects we think are gonna have the most impact on students and provide them the best, impacts on connectivity and safety. Potentially that could be something we look to as kind of a tiebreaker, but it's really not a big emphasis of the program.
This is Dewan. Again, the only way it would impact you is if your previous project was delayed. So say you needed an extension past the 15 months, or the project was delayed, again, for right-of-way issues or some other cause for a significant point in time, we would assign point penalties on your next application. So it would impact you on a negative way in that aspect. But if you applied, received a grant, your project was completed in time, and you applied again, which is not uncommon in the trails programs that we administer, that there's no problem, there's no penalty that way. A lot of our projects are larger projects, and they need to be phased out in, say, 4 or 5 phases. And we have communities that come in every year to finish one phase and to come in and do the next phase, and we have no problem with that. And we award them money year after year if they can get the projects done on time.
Thank you. That was the last of our questions that had come into the question box. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I did drop a link to part 3 of Show Me the Money in the chat box, and we'll make sure to send that link out on our follow-up email as well. Jeff, any concluding remarks?
I'd just like to thank all the panelists for taking time out of their schedule, as well as members of the audience for participating in the webinar. So I will close with that, Victoria.
Thank you. Everybody stay safe and have a good rest of your day. Take care.